What's up everybody, Commander Sanctum here, and today we have a brand new deck tech using Anti-Venom Horrifying Healer. Anti-Venom is a 5/5 symbiote hero for 5 white pips that has, when Anti-Venom enters, if he was cast, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, and, if damage would be dealt to Anti-Venom, prevent that damage and put that many +1/+1 counters on him. Phytohydra is one of my all-time favorite cards, so when I saw Anti-Venom had a similar ability, I just knew I had to make a deck around him. For this deck tech, we'll be looking at all the ways we have access to redirect damage from us to Anti-Venom, force our opponents to block him, and allow him to block as many creatures as possible. These acts will help make Anti-Venom absolutely monstrous, which will supplement with cards that can help him hit our opponents in combat, helping close out the game with commander damage. With that, let's get into the card highlights. One of the best ways to utilize Anti-Venom's ability is to redirect damage that would normally be done to us over to him. This not only saves us from taking the damage, but also makes him become stronger, making it a truly win-win situation. For this, we have access to some of the OG permanents that do this in Pariah and Pariah Shield. We also have a new card from the Spiderman set, with great power, that does the redirection, while also passively buffing the creature for each aura and equipment attached to it. That won't be too relevant for us, outside of with great power being attached itself, but it's a nice added bonus to a card we would play even if it didn't have that line of text. Martyrdom and Gideon's Sacrifice are one-time effects that can also achieve this, but have the added benefit of redirecting damage that would be done to permanents you control as well, not just yourself. These can make for great combat tricks, since you can block any of your opponent's attacking creatures and cast this to redirect all that damage that would be done to your creatures to Anti-Venom instead. In this scenario, that opponent's creatures would still take the blocking damage, so these are great ways to snipe off some of your opponent's things while still getting the effect we want. Guilty Conscience works a little bit differently. This one makes it so that whenever the enchanted creature deals damage, it also takes that much damage as well. This turns Anti-Venom into an even better attacker or blocker, but can also be used as a sort of removal for your opponent's creatures, since you can instead enchant it onto one of their creatures that will hopefully then die the next time it deals damage to something. Speaking of Anti-Venom blocking, the more creatures we can block with him in a turn, the more powerful he'll become. To help facilitate this, we have a number of spells that'll let him block as many creatures as he wants, really maximizing the whole theme of us taking minimal damage while making Anti-Venom as big as possible. Valor Made Real is a cheap instant that can help us do this for a turn, making for a great combat trick that we can hold back and surprise our opponents with if they end up attacking us with a huge army. Entangler is instead an enchantment that does this, mitigating the surprise of it, but still being useful since it'll give this ability to Anti-Venom for as long as he and the aura stick around on the battlefield. Give No Ground is a decent bit more expensive than Valor Made Real, but does the same thing while also simultaneously giving the creature a huge boost of power with a +2/+6 increase. This one will be especially effective in cases where Anti-Venom doesn't yet have many counters on him, potentially letting us take out a larger creature, rather than simply chump blocking it for the turn. Nemesis Mask works in the opposite fashion, and acts like the card Lure, forcing all creatures to block the attacking creature. This card makes Anti-Venom a monster of an attacker, since your opponents will have no choice but to block when he attacks, likely killing off at least a few of their creatures in the process, if Anti-Venom has been able to gain enough counters at that point. To help increase the damage Anti-Venom can deal in combat, either to creatures or players, we have a sort of variant on a traditional pump spell. Rather than innately giving a power increase, however, these cards instead can deal damage to Anti-Venom, making him larger due to his ability. Divine Arrow, Cosmium Blast, and Gideon's Reproach are 3 cards that do the exact same thing. They are 2 mana instants that deal 4 damage to an attacking or blocking creature. Since these will resolve before combat damage is done, Anti-Venom's ability will also trigger and resolve, giving him an increase of 4 power in that combat. These can be a nice way to either get those last few points of commander damage in on an opponent, or surprise your opponent by turning your chump blocker into a creature killer. We also have Joust Through and Sonar Strike for this, both of which do something similar as the previous cards, but with either less damage or increased utility. The best part of all of these types of cards is that you don't always have to target Anti-Venom with them. They can also just be used as straight up kill spells if need be, so long as the targeted creature is attacking or blocking, and it'll die with 3 or 4 more damage done to them. This versatility is what makes these types of cards really shine in a deck like this. Since Anti-Venom's ability specifically adds counters, we can use cards that give buffs to modified creatures to help us make sure we can end games with commander damage. Abzan Falconer is going to be one of the best ones, since it'll give our Anti-Venom flying, making it much easier to attack unimpeded to kill off an opponent. Envoy of the Ancestors doesn't help give us Evasion for our Anti-Venom, but instead will give him lifelink, letting us simply last longer in the game. Since we're going to be more or less focused heavily on one creature, this will be important in those situations where we may only have a few creatures out and are getting attacked by an opponent's large board every turn. To help further with the combat and evasion for our Anti-Venom, we can also use cards that give him Trample. Trample will be a super effective way to kill off our opponents, since the whole goal of the deck is to make Anti-Venom as large as possible, making it so they're unlikely to have enough blocking toughness to sustain an attack later in the game. Loxodon Warhammer, Shadow Spear, and Hero's Heirloom all give the equipped creature Trample, as well as some other bonuses. The Warhammer and Spear give the creature lifelink as well, while the Heirloom gives it haste, as long as it's legendary. All of these abilities will come in handy for us in different scenarios, so the fact that they're added bonuses is a nice cherry on top. Another way to make sure our Anti-Venom can hit is to make him unblockable. For this, we have Key to the City, which not only makes a creature unblockable, but can be a decent source of card draw every turn it's used as well. Whispersilk Cloak is the old school way of making a creature unblockable, but keep in mind that it also gives Shroud. While this can help protect Anti-Venom from removal, it can also be a detriment in some cases, since a lot of our other spells want to specifically target him to get some sort of effect. Brotherhood Regalia is the newest and probably one of the best ways to give a creature unblockable, since it also has a low equip cost for a legendary creature, and provides a small amount of protection with Ward 2 as well. To truly maximize our Anti-Venom's ability, we want to make sure we can both attack and block as much as possible. Vigilance is going to be the absolute best way to achieve this, of which we have a few options to do so. Sarah's Blessing is a 2-mana enchantment that'll give all of our creatures Vigilance, not just Anti-Venom, though the additional creatures aren't really as relevant for us in this deck. Still, since all we care about is giving Anti-Venom it, this card works perfectly well for our needs. Haunted Cloak is actually one of the better options, since it gives us 3 keywords we care about: Vigilance, Trample, and Haste. Since it also only costs 1 to equip, the haste is likely to be relevant in cases where our Anti-Venom dies and we want to bring him back and pump him up as quickly as possible. Finally, there's Brave the Sands, which acts like a Sarah's Blessing, but with the added benefit of letting our creatures block an additional creature each combat. This is perfect for us, since it fills 2 slots we want, the Vigilance aspect and the ability to block more creatures, making this an excellent addition to our arsenal. As mentioned before, our strategy really revolves around Anti-Venom, making him an easy target for our opponents to disrupt our game plan. To help mitigate this, we have a number of protection spells we can use to make sure he sticks around as long as possible. There are a few ways to do this that help with various types of removal. Rebuff the Wicked acts as a single mana counterspell, but works specifically against targeted removal and only spell-based, not ability-based. Restoration Magic can help against both targeted removal and non-exile board wipes, since it can give a creature indestructible and hexproof, making it one of the better options, especially for a single mana. God's Willing gives a targeted creature protection from a color. This will mostly help us against targeted removal, but can also act as an evasion combat trick, since it can make your Anti-Venom unblockable to whatever color creatures your opponents have, making it a nice versatile option that fits multiple categories. Probably the best form of protection comes in the form of phasing. Since a phased out creature is considered to, effectively, not exist on the battlefield, it can protect against all the types of removal, whether it be targeted, destruction-based board wipes, or even exile-based ones. Clever Concealment will let you phase out any non-land permanents you control, making it phenomenal against cards like Farewell or other all-encompassing board wipes. Robe with Stars, however, is probably the absolute best protection spell we have, since it can be used over and over again, no matter what the opponent does. The robe itself is even hard to take out, since it phases out alongside the creature. If an opponent casts an artifact removal spell against it, as long as it's equipped to a creature, you can simply activate its ability to phase the creature out, taking the robe with it. This will then fizzle the removal spell, since the robe no longer exists, making it truly one of the best protection sources we have. So far we've been focusing on Anti-Venom's damage prevention ability, but what about his reanimation ability? For this, we have some good reanimation targets in the form of creatures that draw a card when they enter. Spirited Companion, Helpful Hunter, and Wall of Omens are all creatures that cost 2 mana and draw a card when they enter. The benefit of these cards in a deck like this is the fact that they act as good chump blockers. Get them out early to draw a card, then use them as chump fodder for an attack so that when you get around to casting Anti-Venom, you'll have a target in the graveyard that you can reanimate. That's really all they're here for, to get us some card advantage and soak up some damage, but don't overlook that. Card draw is one of the best things you can do in a game of Magic, so their limited capabilities in our deck is still very strong as a whole. Finally, there are some good utility cards that work well with our overall theme. Wave of Reckoning is a type of board wipe removal spell, but one that has heavy restrictions. Every creature that has equal or more power than their toughness will die, but all others will survive. That's not the main purpose of this card for us, however. The real purpose is to kill off some creatures while also giving Antivenom a potentially large amount of counters all at once. Since each creature deals damage to itself, this means that Antivenom will also deal damage to itself. Since this damage will be prevented and counters added to him, this spell effectively is a way to permanently double Antivenom's power and toughness. Again, versatility is king, and this card is a great example of that. We also have Sure Strike Trident, a great way to kill an opponent with a large Antivenom without having to attack with them. While throwing the spear, as it were, is pretty expensive at 4 mana, the fact that you can kill off an opponent so long as Antivenom is large enough makes this an absolutely great include, especially against decks that use ways to hinder or outright prevent us from attacking them. Here's an example deck list utilizing all the previously mentioned cards. Additional cards include more great card draw reanimation targets in Skyscanner and Roving Harper, damage redirect effects and Saving Grace, and more protection spells in Blacksmith's Skill and Lauren's Escape. Antivenom is a super cool commander. Like I mentioned before, Phytohydra is one of my all-time favorite cards, and this is basically like one on a legendary. Honestly, with how many ways we have to redirect damage and mess with combat, I really don't think it'll be very difficult to get Antivenom's power up very quickly. From there, we have a ton of ways to make sure we can hit our opponent with them, combat-wise or not, making it a perfect balance of value engine and payoff. That being said, however, there's one thing I want everyone to be aware of. I keep mentioning Phytohydra, and while it and Antivenom are similar, there's one key difference. The way Phytohydra is worded makes the damage to counters effect a replacement effect. This is due to the word instead on the card. Antivenom, however, is not a replacement effect. He takes the damage, which is then prevented and turned into counters. The keyword here being prevented. This means that if someone has a card that says damage can't be prevented, Antivenom can still die from damage if it's more than his current toughness. This is a rather huge distinction, and one that needs to be at the forefront of everyone's mind if playing him. This also makes it so that any cards that specifically say damage can't be prevented are going to be public enemy number 1 for us, since it's a huge risk to our entire strategy. And speaking of risks, Antivenom has the common downside of pretty much all decks that focus almost entirely on a single card, and that's removal. Sure, Antivenom can't be killed with damage in most cases, but there are still a plethora of ways for him to die to other effects. That's why the protection spells are going to be so important for him. If you're in a removal heavy meta, it may even make more sense to add more protection to him, just so he's not constantly killed as soon as he enters. Still, even with these downsides, I think Antivenom is going to be a super cool and super fun commander to play with, and highly recommend checking him out. I hope you enjoyed watching this deck tech on Antivenom Horrifying Healer. The full deck list outline in this video can be found at the Archedeck link at the top of the description. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to drop a like and comment, as well as subscribe to the channel for more Magic content. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.